how do you go about reprogramming your brain? What's the practical steps?
Neuroscientists used to believe that you couldn't, right? Like there was this ideology that once you got past like age 35, you were kind of locked and loaded and you really couldn't shift your personality.
Welcome to the podcast, Monsters. I'm your host, Doug Bartlett, a serial entrepreneur, founder and owner of Bartlett Roofing. Welcome to the Monster Mindset Podcast, guys. Glad you're here. Today, I have with me Ashlyn Bartlett. Ashlyn's been on several episodes. You know a little bit about her if you've been watching. We also have Brenda Lee. Brenda Lee is a mindset coach, leadership development, just really helps with a lot of different things. I'd really like you to kind of dive into that, Brenda Lee, and just tell us a little bit about what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, it sounds like you're not really sure. You're not really sure what I do.
Well, I mean, I know what you do for us, right? We've actually hired you as a consultant and had you come in and work with our team and those side of things. Personal development, leadership development. We're going to dive into that a little bit today.
Yeah.
But I'd like you to kind of tell us in your words where you feel like your strengths are at and just about you personally. Who are you?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, who I am really is a single mom of 4 boys. And we were just chatting about Disneyland and I was telling Ashlyn how we just went and spent 8 days together. And I was like, yeah, I definitely am a single mom. And you boys are driving me crazy. Yeah. Right? Like we did 8 days, 24/7 together. So that's who I am to the core. My biggest passion is my little people. So as far as work is concerned, you know, it's really interesting because I started in this space helping people recover from divorce, right? I was a divorce coach. And I've got background in corporate and a couple different businesses. I was a general contractor, right? Like leading people, leading in management, leading construction teams, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I didn't have a purpose. It wasn't fulfilling. And I knew I have gone through a lot, right? Like I went through a 14-year marriage that was crappy. My parents had a lot of issues, right, that I was raised with. And so it really caused this fascination in me to understand human behavior and why people do what they do, why like certain addicts can walk away from an addiction while others can't, and they're stuck in it in a lifelong cycle and repeating that cycle. And so I really just dove in on human behavior. And so that's how that transition started. And what happened with my divorce clients, they were always entrepreneurs, high-level CEOs. They would have this aha moment and be like, this has nothing to do with my divorce, right? And I'm like, oh, you get it. Like my work here is done, right? So then they started referring me to non-divorced people who would go through, and that's how we actually, my team and I coined the phrase of like, divorce is not just marital. You can have a divorce of a business partner or empty nester syndrome, or people often say like midlife crisis. And I'm like, no, it's not a midlife crisis. It's just a midlife awakening. You've been told who you have to be all your life, and you wake up one day and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. That's not who I am. But people don't have the skill set to figure out who they are and discover. So they do sex, drugs, rock and roll instead of digging deep and doing the hard work, right? That's the crisis part where they know they're not in alignment with themselves, but they don't know how to fix it. So
I don't know. Anyway, I think that sex, drugs, and rock and roll sounds kind of fun, actually.
Yeah, you know, sometimes, right?
Can I go through that for a while first?
Oh, my goodness.
Before I go through personal growth?
Some people, yep, that's generally what happens, right? Yeah. So, and then those people, one got a hold of me and said, I really want you to shift this and figure this out for my team. And it was actually the blend of like the perfect skill set for me, where I had done the coaching, the mindset, like all that kind of stuff, getting people to their identity. And you guys both know we do hard work. Like we're not doing easy work. So we're digging deep and we're getting to the root of issues. And their request was to take it to their team. And I was like, I've done corporate, I've run businesses, I've run teams. This is the perfect marriage of the two. And so that's how the team leadership development came to be. And then the retreats came up. You were actually the first retreat like that we went away on one where we did trainings and stuff. But
to put that in perspective, we hired you to, just so everybody knows, we hired you to come to our leadership retreat, which was a leadership development. And that was a really transformative weekend.
Oh my gosh.
Or a few days for my team.
Yep.
We had a lot, there was 22, 23 people there.
Just about 23 people in McCall, Idaho. And I think we all got cabin fever by the end of that.
Shocking, because you guys all stayed in the house together. But I think that was part of what where that bonding happened.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can't get away from issues when you're together.
But there was enough growth there that is interesting to me to observe because, people really went through a transformative experience because there were, out of 23 people, there was 2 or 3 women, counting you.
And me included, yep.
Mm-hmm. And not one person walked out of there without having cried at some point. And it's
Mostly
like they were
Ben.
going through, real personal awakenings and changes. And that's super important for leadership development.
Super. It's critical. And this is the thing, like, people don't understand. A lot of businesses will really focus on SOPs, or, they're looking at their bottom line and they're trying to figure out how to cut product so that they can get more profitability, whatever it is, right? And they don't recognize the importance of their team members. I always say it's time to put the I back in team. And COVID really shifted things where it made a lot of companies more aware of the reality that you can't separate church and state, like home and work. You can't. And that's partly where at the retreat, we did personal work. It had nothing to do with work, with Bartlett Roofing. It was all personal growth. When people grow into their essence and they're being the best that they can be, now they can bring their best to you at work and perform and be leaders that they weren't capable of before.
My personal belief is that you only have the energy to really excel in like one area. And so if you're fighting bad energy at home,
yes,
you're never going to excel at work. It's because your spirit only has a finite amount that it can be tapped into at any given time. And so if things are going south at home, then you're not going to be able to use that energy that you're using to try to keep this relationship or this disharmony, whatever it is in your life.
Yep.
You're not going to be able to take that and apply it to your work and to your success in life.
Yep.
Because it's tapped already.
Yep.
I was victim of that for a long time of trying to separate work and home, and literally having multiple conversations with you and other people of it, and coming to that understanding and realization that everything that happens in your life affects the rest of your life, whether it is your relationships with your your colleagues and your peers at work, or your relationships at home. You're going to carry that with you. And if you don't deal with your shit, for lack of better words, like it's going to come out in weird ways.
Well, one of my favorite phrases is you have to feel to heal, right? Like we've got to address our stuff. We want to just stuff this stuff away and pretend that it's not an issue. And then that comes out in road rage, right? And it comes out at the most inopportune time, and usually the most embarrassing times, right? Or you're in a board meeting and somebody says something and you snap at them and it's totally over the top and everybody's like, what in the hell, right? Like, get your crap together. But without dealing with that stuff, it's going to spew out on everybody around you. It just does. It's inevitable.
I think one thing that has happened from a result of having you on, as our leadership coach at Bartlett, is that in that time, in the last year since we've had you on, when stuff like that happens and people are popping off, or you notice like something's going on, you're like, okay, what's really going on with you? Because I know it has absolutely nothing to do with this.
Yes. I love that. Ashlyn, that's such a good point. And we talked a lot about that at the retreat, where when you understand from other people, when whatever their behavior is, you get when we can remove and separate our emotions and we're not making meaning, right? Like somebody's not making meaning about you, maybe crying over something at work, when really it's about your kid or what you're dealing with your ex and all that kind of stuff, right? It has nothing to do with that. When people understand that, it removes that emotional tie that they have toward their response to you. They're not coming back at you with ammunition. Now they're like, oh, whoa, hey, it's empathy. Are you going through something? Help me understand how I can support you, instead of don't talk to me that way, right? It's a whole different dynamic within the leadership teams with people in general, right? Like it affects every relationship that you have.
It's really interesting to just see once we start implementing this kind of stuff, see how people grow through it and how much better of a person they come out on the back end after having gone through some transformative type of experiences. So
I was just chatting with somebody the other day about this, where we were saying like everything that we go through in life, we can either use it for good or not, right? And I've got a lot of baggage. I had a lot of crap I had to unpack, and so I get into this marriage, right, where I'm bringing all this baggage from my parents. I've got narcissism, manipulation, like control freaks. My dad was physically abusive. There's all kinds of stuff where in a lot of areas where my dad lacked, my mom made up for in different areas, right? It was just dysfunctional on every level. And so we bring that baggage into marriage, and then I'm in this 14-year marriage that is complete nightmare. He had an addiction. He was unwilling to give up. We could never even get to things that were the real issues because we couldn't even get past that one thing, right? Saw 9 different counselors that I can remember off the top of my head. I was like, holy crap, we saw 9 counselors over the course of our marriage. We did neurofeedback, neuroemotional technique. We did everything under the sun. I had read more books about his addiction than he did. It was just this, like I said, it was an obsession of discovering what makes people tick. So when I was wrestling, I was a general contractor, and I was like, this is not fulfilling for me, right? Like great, I can build houses all day long, but this isn't, what am I doing to change people's lives, right? And what am I doing with what I've gone through? I had the keys to the kingdom of how to get over divorce. I knew how to do it. And the average time it takes people to get over divorce is 7 years. And I was like, that just is not It's not necessary. It's a really long time.
Yeah.
And it's not just divorce, it's any major transition, like a death or something along those lines, where you've got the grieving process, right? Or your identity is somewhat wrapped up into something, and now that's gone, and you're standing there going, holy crap, who am I, right? And people don't know how to figure that out. So this is the reason I do this is all that I've gone through. And, you know, somebody says all the time, one of my really good, George Siebold, I think you know George with Toulouse. Yeah. He says, one thing you can't get off of the internet is experience. I had all this experience and I had overcome it all, and I wanted to be able to give that gift to other people. So that's how this all, you know, that's my purpose, is my drive. I love people. I genuinely love people, right? And when you see people and they're hurting and they're broken and they're lashing out, like you said, you know, where they're going off the handle about something that has nothing to do with work or whatever, I hate that for them, right? And I know how to help them get through that. And so that's the purpose, right? Is to put people back together. And one of the things I smack my clients if they ever say this is, people think they're broken. The reality, nobody's broken. You just have had a lot of shit. You've just had a lot of shit. And we're not given the skill set in schools or anywhere. Counselors, all my clients that come to me for the one-on-one have been through multiple counselors. They're not teaching this. And I hate to say that. There's a few diamonds in the rough that do, but nobody's teaching this stuff. And it's just not right. It's not right. People are in bondage, in prison, their own prison, over their life experiences, not understanding how to cope with it. And it just doesn't need to be that way.
What would you say are the first steps that people can take to like start moving towards transforming themselves to be, you know, if they're going through something that's really dragged them down, you know, maybe it's the ending of a bad marriage, or, you know, whatever is going on in their lives, or maybe they're dealing with addiction. What are some really practical first steps that people can take to like move toward becoming a better person and moving into becoming a leader and changing their lives?
Yeah, so we talked about this at the retreat. I talk about it a lot. Is 70 to 80% of our thoughts are negative. 95% of those thoughts are on repeat. The problem is we think those thoughts are true. We think that it's fact. We beat ourselves up. We think, oh my gosh, like I'm broken. Or a lot of divorced people are like, I'm never going to find somebody. Or, you know, I'm like, whatever. I don't look cute enough. I'm not successful enough. I don't make enough money. Whatever. The whole story that they make up a story in their head. And the reality is it's not fact. So just separating and realizing just that alone, knowing, oh my God, of course, 70, 80% of my thoughts are negative, 95% are on repeat. That right there, you get to disengage your emotional tie to it. Now you're not making meaning about things that are going on, and you're not buying this lie, this story that I call it the 2 a.m. voice, right? It wakes you up, never wakes you up to tell you rocked it at the boardroom. It wakes up to tell you you're a piece of crap, you didn't do this, you didn't get that done, you need to do this, and holy shit, right? And on and on and on it goes. That's not fact. That's not truth.
You know, it's interesting because a few minutes ago I wrote down, what do you feed yourself? And I think that goes right in line with that, and I think that not only your internal story, like what's your internal dialogue, but also what are you feeding yourself externally as well?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And for me, like I stopped watching like the news and all that kind of stuff like 25 years ago.
Yes.
Because I was just like, this is just trash.
Garbage in, garbage out. That's what I was always told.
I don't want to listen to this because
it's true.
Sensationalism and, you know, all the murder that could ever happen in the world.
Yes.
They're going to report on the kidnapping and the things that are in the scale of things in the life I live, very, very rare. I don't see or experience these things. And so what they're feeding me is not my actual reality. And they're making it feel like my reality because it's all this negative that's coming in. So that was like one of the first steps I took is I was like, okay, I need to stop what's coming in. Like, I'm tired of this.
Yes.
I don't want to hear this crap anymore.
Yep.
And so letting that go and then starting to work on myself, reading and, you know, back in the Amway days, I was on their tape program and listening to all that. You know? But it was really good positive feedback. There's a lot of positivity in that, and it was a really good thing for me.
That's a key element, Doug, and I'm glad you brought that up because when we are already defaulting to 70 to 80% negative, we have to, why would we subject ourselves to more negative? We have to mitigate the negative input that we take on all day, every day. I still haven't resolved this with clients, right? Because when they go through this transformation, they recognize you become the 6 of the top 5 people you hang out with, right? And people have that aha moment where they're like, holy crap, this person's a Debbie Downer. That one always shoots my dreams down. This one never supports me when I want to go do, an activity. Or this one sabotages my eating, right? Like healthy eating. I've got a client right right now where his wife does not want him to be healthy, and she sabotages it at every turn, right? And so there's those dynamics where the more you can shut down what you feed that's negative, the more you start to program. And this is a long thing. I mean, you guys know we've been working together for a year, and nothing is ever really resolved, right? Like there's always stuff coming up, and there's always ways to tap back into the lane of remaining positive and staying the right leader and being strong in your leadership role, because life happens.
I feel like some of these things, they're so important, but some of them are like so basic, right? And they're like things that like we've been told by mentors or parents or other counselors or things in our life, but it's not stuff that people are good at practicing every day and staying accountable to. And so that's where I feel like having like a third party, someone that's not necessarily, like I feel like you're a part of our team at Bartlett, right?
Yeah.
But like not necessarily inside the team, but having this perspective looking in, still of having empathy and care for people, of saying, hey, this is what you've got going on. This is what you need to deal with. And so that's been big, I think, for me personally and other members of the team that have been working with you, is saying, hey, I want this additional perspective of someone that's not too close to the tree to not to see the forest.
Yeah. I always say that, like, you can't see the forest through the 6 foot wide redwood that's right in front of your face, right? You can kind of turn back and see, Doug's tree over here and Ashlyn's tree over there, or Blake's, whatever, but you can't see the full picture. My degree is in computer coding, right? And so I always just say I just recode brains now. Like, that's what I do, is we just rewire the brains. But when you come in and you're seeing these dynamics, it's all that input that I take on with all my study of human behavior. I mean, I'll observe, you guys know, well, when we were at that retreat, we were just talking about this with one of the members where he didn't crack. We were a day and a half in, and he was the one guy that hadn't cracked. And that dude was on my radar the whole time. Because when you're in that kind of a dynamic and you're taking all the sensory input from every person in the room, reading their responses, reading their reaction, watching him shift in their seat, like whatever, when it's getting really real and it's getting uncomfortable, and then getting them to that space of safety where they trust you, because that was part of the issue. But the reality is nobody can give what they don't have for themselves. If they don't trust themselves somewhat, they can't give that to other people. I'm able to see that in a way that you guys can't see that when you're down in the trenches and doing the work, right? And so that's where the beauty and the magic happens, I feel like, with the teams, where you guys all hand me little bits, a little handful of the puzzle, and I go put the puzzle together and get to figure it all out. And it's so fun.
I think that's been so huge. And like, if anyone's thinking about like getting a leadership development coach or a personal development coach, like that's your sign to get one, because I think we all like to think we know everything, right?
Yeah, you just can't.
And you don't.
You don't. Nobody does. Nobody does. Even this guy who bootstrapped this from the ground up doesn't know it all, right?
And you can't fix every problem on your own. Like, even if you know what to do, you can't always fix every single problem on your own, right? A lot of this stuff, like you're talking about, is personal development, and it plays into business, and it plays into other relationships and other factors of life. And it's stuff that the individuals have to work on. It's not something you can get them through just by putting your head down and getting through it. You know what I mean?
That's what distinguishes us from most leadership development companies. They come in and want to do the teamwork right away. And I'm like, to me, it just absolutely doesn't make sense. And you guys get this to your core because we've experienced it. Until those individuals are at their whole, they're performing at their best, why even bother with team leadership development, right? Like, they're not bringing their best selves to the table. We need everybody, and everybody always says you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so they kind of concede to that and they drop down to the lowest level. And I call total bullshit on that. Like, that is absolute bullshit. Let's get everybody operating at their peak potential, which is what we did at the retreat, right? Very individual work. Then we can go into the teamwork. Now, how do you guys communicate when you're having a conversation? How do you and Blake have a conversation, right? Where I'm in there like, oh, hold on, that's a bad habit that you just did. Like, let's break this up here right now, and let's have a redo, right?
One thing I want to explore here a little bit is the idea of reprogramming your brain. I'm actually reading a book called Snow Crash right now. It's just recreational. It's the first book ever written, I think, about the metaverse.
Oh, okay.
And one of the premises of the book is people getting their brains reprogrammed.
Yeah.
It's one of the foundational things of the storyline. In the book, it really kind of goes into some deep history, Tower of Babel and weird things about like language and how brains are programmed. And how do you go about reprogramming your brain? What's the practical steps?
Neuroscientists used to believe that you couldn't, right? Like there was this ideology that once you got past like age 35, you were kind of locked and loaded and you really couldn't shift your personality. When we come to the table, we're only bringing 5% of us to the table. 95% of it is all our subconscious. It's all of our belief structure, what we've been conditioned to believe, what we've been told to believe. I call it that conditional gap, where we've got social, parental, school, and religious conditioning, and we're told what we have to be instead of discovering and being on a journey of discovery, of figuring out who we are. So practically speaking, number one is awareness, right? Like you in empowerment, you can shift. People think like I'm stuck and this is just the way I am. And quite frankly, they use that as an excuse because they don't want to do the work, because this is hard work.
I find that that's like the 99% of people is that like they've got these excuses in their brain for why they are the way they are, and they're not willing to like actually tackle that and overcome it.
Right.
And it's like, I feel like that's one of like my personal missions, is to make people realize that they have a lot more potential than they realize that they do. And so how do you like, and so I have, different ways that I try to approach that with like employees and stuff, and talking through that and then putting them through leadership development and those types of things. Reading program, that was actually Ashlyn's idea that we do, here at the office is a weekly, reading book club, and that's been fabulous. But there is a lot of reprogramming that can be done. And it's also really interesting, actually, and this is a total side note, but my girlfriend recently started using microcurrent neurofeedback.
Yeah. Oh, neurofeedback's amazing.
And
it's so
like
cool.
It's given her like immediate results. Like literally like 5 minutes after she's done, she's like, I feel different and better. And like my anxiety's gone down. I don't feel like as wound up about stuff. And so this idea of reprogramming the brain is crazy, like accurate. Like you can do it on a biological level with something like microcurrent neurofeedback, but you can also do it with like cutting off those negative inputs. You can do it by making sure that you're having positive inputs of reading and association of the people that you're with.
Food you're putting in your body.
Oh my gosh, that's huge.
There's so many different steps, and it's like, if you're serious about like changing your life, then you need to start looking at all these areas. Like what's the biology of the situation? Do you need to amp down with the microcurrent neurofeedback? Do you need to eat better? Do you need to cut off the negative input? Do you need to cut off the negative relationships and start feeding yourself with things that are positive? Because if you can start doing that, then suddenly the sky's the limit on where you can go with your life.
Well, and a huge thing, Doug, is belief. So many people. So this, like step number one that I work with my clients. I mean, I've got an 8-week program, right, that I run them through, which is kind of what we do at the retreats, the two day corporate trainings and stuff. Not quite the same, but when we start, it's really like, and I showed you guys that system of we've got our belief structure, right? Our beliefs lead to our thoughts. Our thoughts give us, once we tie emotions to it, now we've got emotions, now we make meaning. And now we're going to behave in a way that's going to give us the result that affirms the belief. Okay, so no matter what your belief is, good, bad, or indifferent, your brain is a goal-achieving machine. It will achieve the goal. Whatever you believe, it's going to achieve it. We're creators. It's just how life works, right? When you break that cycle by shifting your belief, and like you were talking about with your leaders, where you've got so much potential, if they don't believe it, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. Yeah. They have to have that belief. And it's back to those stories that they tell themselves. When you know that the story that maybe your dad told you your whole life, you're never going to amount to anything or whatever, right? Whatever story that people have that's keeping them stifled, when they recognize that's not truth, that is just a story, that's something that somebody placed on me, when I really know that I can do whatever the crap I put my mind to, that's when they can step into that. That's when the door is open and now the work's received. We can lead a horse to water. You can't make it drink, right? We've talked a lot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've experienced that in business and in my personal life with people where like I'm like trying to develop them for them and like you literally can't do it. They have to want to do it, right? And you can give them all the tools. Like you said, you read more books than your ex-husband did. Like you gave yourself everything. If they don't want to do the work, it doesn't matter. There's a John Maxwell quote where he says that somebody asked him like, how do you choose who you work with? And he's like, the first question I ask is if they're working on themselves.
Yeah.
Ashlyn, you, in the last year, I have seen your mindset shift from and I love you, so I'm not trying to like throw you under the bus here.
I know. I'm very aware of it now.
You had this victim mindset a year ago.
Oh, wow.
And
let's talk about this.
You have moved away from that. And I want to know, like, what is the steps that you feel like you took to change that mindset in your life?
Something that's been really big for me since I want to say fall of 2020 is focusing on the things I can control and not the things I can't, because like I think naturally I am, you know, type A, I'm the firstborn. I have a lot of characteristics that are very loud and outgoing, and sometimes that can be a lot for people.
And one of the things we love about you.
Yeah, one of the things people love about me. But so naturally, like I like to be in charge and controlling things. And like I was carrying that into so many places of my life, like we were just talking about, when I was trying to help people that just didn't want to help themselves, and like trying to control situations that I had zero business having control over. And so the first step, like Brenda's talking about, was like having enough self-awareness to say, I have zero control over this situation. I have, like, there's literally nothing I can do about this. So I'm just going to move forward and focus on the things that I can control. And that's a serenity prayer. I've referenced it millions of times over the last couple of years. And so that's one thing that keeps me super, super grounded.
That's actually interesting that you say that, because you getting to that point is very similar, actually, now that I think about this, because I've never really put it together, in where I was at the bottom of like where I was, you know, 8 years ago almost now.
Yeah.
Where I was like, I can't control anything here other than what myself. I'm like, I'm not even doing a good job of controlling my mind, but I can control what I do, what I see. Like I can control the emotions that I put myself through. And what you just described actually really rings of that.
Yeah, that is such a key point. Okay, so people think that you can't control your emotions, and you just hit a massive, massive distinction. We are not at the mercy of our emotions.
Yeah,
and that's what when people get that, and back to that empowerment, right? And then the belief, when they're feeling empowered, like, oh, I can change this. Then they start shifting their belief, which in turn changes their thoughts, which in turn changes their emotions and the meaning that they make of things and the actions that gives them a different result now. But unless that happens, I mean, you can't.
Yeah, let me explain a little bit further, because I knew that like my emotions would come in line if I put myself through the actions that I needed to.
You've talked about that, yeah.
And so they did in a relatively short period of time.
You kind of forced them.
Yeah, I really did, because I was just like, okay, I'm not going to live like this, and so I'm going to do the things that make me feel like they give me the positive
the dopamine boosts and the serotonin.
Yeah. Well, yeah, just I'm going to cut off the negative, and I'm not going to think about the things that I can't control. I'm just going to do what I can control, and I know that the emotions will follow that. And so in that way, I did control my emotions, but it was really a deliberate choice. And I think that that's important, that people have to make a deliberate choice of saying, I am no longer going to be like this. I'm going to be like this instead. And that's the story they start feeding themselves.
Instead.
And then that's the action they also take.
Yep.
That was the other piece that I was going to mention that you just hit on, is the limiting beliefs has been such a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
Not even understanding that like they were limiting beliefs. Like I just thought they were my, like that when you say victim mindset, like I just thought that was my life for so long.
Yep.
Like I didn't even realize it was a victim mindset because I was so unaware of it. And so going through like depression, anxiety pretty heavily, and like being on medication, and then like not feeling anything on medication really sucked. And I was like, I don't want to be this way either. So I got out of this like that like I am sad, or I am like this, like I'm not these things. I need to play into like different words, and they have meaning, and I need to make sure that I'm eliminating the limiting beliefs and starting to play on those positive things and reassuring myself daily, rather than just like beating myself up every day like I'm such a terrible person, because the reality is I'm not a terrible person.
Exactly. Right. And we did that limiting belief exercise at the retreat. In fact, I think like now that it's a year later, I think we talked about this. I was like, go back and revisit that list, because things are going to change. And that, I mean, it's exhaustive, right? So this was the tool that I use for when I present like 70-80% of thoughts are negative, and people are like, I'm not that negative. There were so many people in the room that day with you guys.
Most people, even myself, I was like, what? No, I'm like such a positive person. Everybody is like, oh, Ashlyn's running down the hallway being loud and she's so positive. I'm like, yeah, but what is the story I'm telling myself?
Internal story.
How am I talking to myself every single day? Because the way I talk to myself, I would never talk to you or you or anyone. Yep. It's terrible.
No, and you don't listen to anybody as much as you listen to yourself
either.
So that's the critical piece. And I don't know if there's a way, maybe we can even put a PDF up for the listeners, that limiting belief exercise. Because when you go through and you identify, that's where you're identifying, oh my God, I am oh my gosh, I really am negative. Like, I do not believe that I'm worthy of success. I really struggle with being fit and making sure that my diet is on point. And because I don't think I deserve that success. I don't deserve to be happy. I don't deserve a good relationship, because at our core, it's an unworthiness issue, right? And it's based off of all that conditioning we talked about. But when you go through that statements, the limiting belief statements, and you write the opposite, that is an immediate practical thing the listeners could do today, right? Whether you're writing the opposite, and it's critical to write, back to the brain's a goal achieving machine, it's critical to write your positive statement in the positive. Like you can't say, I'm not going to eat Burger King anymore. Yeah, right. Like, I'm not going to eat Burger King anymore. It's, I choose to fuel my body like a Porsche, right? That's the statement that you have to make. And that's now the story that you get to create, because we're creators. You create whatever story you want. But why not? So if we can create whatever story we want, why aren't we choosing to create a killer story?
Right.
I remember you talking about like the reasoning for the way that you word that new belief statement being so important is because
So
your
critical.
brain doesn't understand the difference between the I'm not going to eat Burger King anymore or like I'm not healthy.
Just latches to Burger King.
Yeah, and that's it. And so we can only associate with so many things at one time. And so that like words are so powerful.
They're so powerful.
So powerful.
They really matter. That's why oftentimes, and I know I don't know, whatever, there are so many times where I'm talking with people and I'll be like, hold on. And I literally will pause and I will get the words articulated correctly before I let them out of my mouth. And I didn't used to be that way. I mean, I we had this issue in our marriage, but I was a bitch. Like, I was a terrible wife, right? Like, there was all kinds
Your
of
ex
things.
is going to be watching this and you're like, yeah, you were.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Oh my God,
yeah, for
that's
sure.
so funny.
But it's all like what, I didn't understand all of this, right? And so I'm reacting out of like, well, you did this to me, so like this whole psycho. And so learning, that's the whole premise of this. We can learn. If I could learn that, anyone can learn that, right? And I still watch my mom do it, where she is so reactionary, and I'm like, oh my God, no wonder I was the way I was, right? And she hasn't done the work, right? And so when we do the work and we see it, we really are in control of our life.
Oh my God. I had this like moment a couple weeks ago where like someone else in my life was acting like the way I used to act.
Right?
And I was just like, like I was so appalled. I was like, wow, no wonder everybody was like, you're so negative and you're so this and you're playing a victim mindset, because damn, that is annoying. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's just like, wow, like why did I ever act like that?
Well, you don't realize it when people aren't self-aware, and you don't know this. You're not. It's back to what we said before. People aren't taught this.
Yeah.
You're not taught this. You're taught to believe the news, believe Victoria's Secret model expectation or Men's Cover magazine expectations. We are conditioned and inundated with what we're supposed to believe or what we're supposed to be and do. Yeah. We don't recognize that we have a choice. Yep. We really do have a choice.
Yeah. Just as a side note, Ashlyn, I think it would be great for you to go try the microcurrent neurofeedback.
Yeah, you were saying that last weekend.
And then let's do a podcast
on
after it with Brandon. He's the doctor.
The doctor?
That does it.
Yeah.
I'm so down. Let's do it.
Neurofeedback is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I'm glad you brought that up again, because I did want to hit on that point where what happens with our brain is we've got the neural pathways, right? And they all connect. And the more we tell ourselves a story, the more, again, brain being a goal-achieving machine, the more it starts to believe it, right? Again, good or bad, whatever story you're telling it, it's going to believe it. So when you do this work, the neurofeedback, it's like pruning neural pathways and reforming new pathways. It's like I liken it to a cow rut, right? Where we just get in this zone and it's known, and people want to stay in the known. That's the other challenge. People don't like to get uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable doing this work. Everybody in that room a year ago at the retreat was uncomfortable massively at some point, if not the whole time, right? Because it's uncomfortable. Because we want to stay in the safety of known. And it's a default, fight, flight, or freeze, right? It's what our brain does. It's how we've survived as a species. We stay where it's safe, even if the change promises a better life, right?
Yeah. I think that's one of the key points, and that's actually one of the ways you let off that retreat was by being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so like that self-recognition, and then by being willing to be vulnerable, it changes like how you perceive yourself and your ability to have self-recognition of saying, hey, I'm not invulnerable. I don't have to have a wall up. I can change myself, and I can take feedback on the things that are happening around me with the people, with the relationships that are happening, to understand how I'm impacting other people and what kind of vulnerability I need to have and what kind of change needs to come from that.
I was going to say, like, that environment it creates when you're vulnerable with the people that you're working with, whether it's like coach to team, subordinate and leader, peer to peer. Like, when you are the one that leads off that vulnerability, you're saying, I'm putting my walls down. I'm allowing this to be a safe space. I trust you. And so in turn, they're going to trust, you know,
they're going to trust
you back. Yep. Yeah. And so I think that's so powerful when you do that, when you are vulnerable with your people, with your tribe, whoever that is, whether it's at work or at home, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the key traits of being a good leader is you have to learn to be vulnerable, because everybody's got this perception from watching, you know, Mad Men on TV that, you know, the boss is like the kingpin and he's like knows everything and he's perfect and, you know, he's calling all the shots.
Yeah.
And that's bullshit.
It is.
It's complete bullshit. And it's like, what you got to start with is, hey, I'm making the best shot I know here.
Yeah, right.
And you need to understand that, and I need your support in order for that shot to work.
Right.
And that's part of leadership is being able to admit that you may not know the exact perfect answer every time. There's going to be times where your experience will tell you, yeah, absolutely, this is the way we're doing it, and there's no way we're doing what you're talking about, because I've tried that 8 times.
Right.
And it doesn't work.
And it's back to that experience.
Right.
A lot of that.
So but the experience needs to be coupled with vulnerability for knowing when you don't know the answer. And that changes your leadership, which makes you an actually exponentially better leader.
Well, and it doesn't, like, we've talked about this a lot. In fact, that's what we're working on with this team, right, is when you get vulnerable and you're leading well, you can't, it's back to you can't give what you don't have, right? And that's part of why when I start those retreats, because of the nature of the work that we're doing, you guys aren't going to get the transformation if I didn't lead that way. Lead by example of, we all have our bag of crap. Every single one there's no judgment. There is no, like, you can bring whatever to this table and it's not going to, there's no judgment here, right? Your bag just looks different than my bag. Your stuff looks different than my stuff and vice versa. But when we recognize that everybody has crap, every single stinking human on the planet, that the walls naturally come down and we're able to be vulnerable because we're like, oh, you've gone through it too. It just looked different.
Yeah, that point where you were vulnerable exponentially changed the conversation, because everybody went like, oh shit. Yeah. This is about to get real.
Yep.
Yeah.
And boy, did it. Woo! I mean, that's what we
It's one way to start our week with you.
Yeah. But we would not have gotten the movement had I not done that, right?
And that was a lot really brave of you. So my hat's off to you for that, by the way.
Listen, no, here's the deal. When you get to full acceptance of who you are and the life that you've gone through and the things that you've endured and overcome, I don't have any shame. It is what it is. And so that judgment, back to what we can't give what we don't have for ourselves. I couldn't do that 5 years ago because I still judged myself and I still punished myself and I hadn't forgiven myself. All the things that we worked through, like all those exercises, right? When you haven't done that work yourself, you can't give that to other people, right? So for me, it's like, it's not a brave thing. This is real. This is really, you guys are the same thing. It's all everybody here puts their pants on the same way, right? Yep. And when we lead as leaders in that space, it radically opens up the door and for everyone, for their growth. You can't foster, like what you're saying, being with your employees to get them to their peak potential. You can't foster that if you're not leading that way, literally.
Yeah.
You literally have to lead that way.
I was going to say, like, I have always been pretty transparent about stuff, sometimes to a fault. So people know a lot about me. It's fine. Like, I don't have a problem with it. But what it does is, like, it allows this, like, I end up speaking to more people. And, like, it's not because I have this, like, initiative or like agenda. Yeah, agenda is a good word, of like trying to get more people to hear my story. It just is like they're relating to that vulnerability, even if it isn't, like you said, our bags aren't exactly the same. And so it's allowing them, like you said, to say, oh, okay, like they've been through shit too. They're a real person. They're not unreachable. Because I think that's something that, especially in business, that leadership suffers from a lot, is being like untouchable. Like you were talking about with the Mad Men analogy of like, I've got to just be like this know-it-all boss guy that is like, I can do no wrong. Everybody needs to follow suit and da-da-da-da-da-da, right? And like I think to some degree everybody suffers with that at some point in leadership. And it's actually the exact opposite, which is so wild.
Well, it's driven out of fear, right? One of our basic human needs is we want to be accepted. We want to have community. We want to be loved, right? Like those are the basics that everybody needs and wants. So we're afraid, like, oh my gosh, if you know about that abortion, Doug might not want me to be his consultant, right? Like, so that fear, or if you knew that, you know, I was damn near an alcoholic in my marriage before I got divorced, that you would think twice about going and having drinks with me, or whatever it might be, right? So whatever it is, there's judgment, and the reality is, like I said, is every single person has this stuff. And when we just are accepting of that and accepting of people's mistakes, and this is one thing we've really worked with your guys' team, fail faster. Failure is not, you're not going to get fired over failure. Figure it out. Try something. Seek a solution. Come solution oriented. But it's okay if you fail. We all do. We all do.
Giving ourselves permission to fail.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Because if you don't, then you, out of that fear, you withhold and you don't take risks that could be the next $1 million business, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a game changer, you know, letting go of the past. And, you know, for me, like actually when I got really real with my relationships and was open about the skeletons in my closet, they lost all the power over me.
Yes.
And then I was able to forgive myself for the trash that I'd put myself or my family through, and become the person that I was meant to be.
Yeah, right. Yep. You're clearing off the garbage. I often liken it to when I'm in my office, I have a picture behind or on my wall, but it's got glass on it, right? And that conditional gap, right? The parent, social, religious, and school conditioning. It's like there's this beautiful piece of artwork back there, right? With the picture, but there's that glass up front, and that conditioning is like putting black paint all over that glass. And the essence of who you are can't come out, and it can't shine, and people can't see it in its true authenticity because of all the conditional gaps. In the past, you bring up a point about the past, and this is something I talk about all the time. The past is not real. It doesn't exist except for in your head. That's it. Like, let it go. It doesn't exist anymore.
Whoa. Light bulb.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true, though. Like,
Right.
It's not the current reality.
Right. And because we're
Wild.
creators, we get to shift the rest of the trajectory of the rest of our life if we choose to. It's only right now, this moment right here. Future doesn't exist. Past doesn't exist. It's all just here.
Yeah. Yep. I think we're going to move toward wrapping this up a little bit here, but I want to ask you to give us, you know, some practical tips if you're looking to transform yourself or have a transformation in your business, or, you know, bring up leaders. What are some, you know, practical tips like right now is that people can go out there and do and embrace and tackle to make those changes?
Yeah. So one of my favorite books is, and I just love Dr. Joe Dispenza anyway. He's one of the, I'm not certain he's a neuroscientist. I think he might be, but anyway, nonetheless, he really talks about meditation. So when we right before we fall asleep and right when we wake up, you know, that tiny little itty bitty window where you're like, oh, my bed's so comfortable. And then it hits you and you're like, oh crap, I got to do this today and I need to take care of that and I should check my email and da da. That itty bitty window, we're in the theta state. Our brain drops down into this theta state. What meditation does is it drops you back into that state as well. Meditation is the fastest, most effective way to reprogram your brain, like you're talking about. So Joe Dispenza has a ridiculous amount of meditations out there. You can get them on Amazon. You can download them. You can buy them from a store, whatever. But reprogramming your brain and getting into that state. And a lot of times, entrepreneurs especially are like, oh, I don't have time for that. You can't afford not to. Like, look at the transformation that you've gone through, right? Yeah. Just in a year, where your potential, you're much more efficient, you're much more successful, you're creative, right? You're stepping into a space of creativity instead of being stuck in that victim mode where we shut down creativity when we're stuck in that mode. You can either grow or not. It's one or the other. You can't do both at the same time, right? And so anyway, so meditation is my absolute number one. It will change your world. But the other thing people say too, and this is one thing I just want to hit on this real quickly too, is meditation's hard. It took me like 3 years before I could get into like 5 minutes of meditation without getting sidetracked and scrolling off and thinking about all these other things. It's really, really difficult. So be patient with yourself and give yourself grace, right? Like, because it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to have a radical shift overnight. I mean, you know, whatever, like we had a pretty radical shift at the retreat, but there's still work to be done. Right. And it's okay. And I think that's one of the biggest things is humans, is to give ourselves a little more grace and everybody else around us, right? And so be patient with yourself, but definitely get into meditation. He's got a book too. It's Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Can you spell his name? Joe Dispenza?
Dispenza, Dispenza.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
He's freaking phenomenal. But his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, really breaks down like a lot of in the purpose of meditation and how we can actually rewire our brain.
Okay.
I liked how you talked about how you can't afford not to.
You
like,
can't afford
a lot
not
of
to.
people look at this stuff and they're like, woo woo, you know, like you went on a retreat to the mountains and rented a cabin and got a leadership coach. Why is that helping your business? How are you getting more revenue, right?
Yes.
Not to squirrel us
Ashlyn,
anymore, but I think this is an important question.
I think this is I'm really glad you brought this up because can we share your numbers from last year, right? Like, so we did this a year ago. So what is it? It's March.
Yep.
The first 5 months you guys didn't have, you were in the red, right? Yeah. And after the retreat, so you tell me, Doug, did this have a good ROI for the team, right? Like, I mean, I don't think we can even put a number on the ROI that has been had for this company over leadership development.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And you ended the year, I brag on you about this all the time because I'm like, not only did they get back in the black, they ended the year with only 7 months of work at 42% growth. Like that is freaking insane. Yeah, that's insane.
We had a heck of a year, and there was a lot to that. Leadership development was a huge part of it. There was other stuff that we addressed as well, but it was an exciting year, and I think that the leadership development and personal growth is one of the biggest keys to any business's success.
Yeah.
And
I think
there is
everything.
direct ROI, because if you can't develop leaders, you're going to be stuck.
Yeah.
Period. That's all there is to it. You're not going to go any further than what you can go individually.
Yep. Totally. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, yep. There's a definite direct ROI to it.
I think it plays into everything. Honestly, I just think that it just goes back to we're all people, and business is full of people and humans, and that is our biggest asset in the world is people and working together. And if you're not working with your team, and if you're not developing your team, especially in today's workforce,
oh my gosh, you'll lose them.
You're going to lose them, and they're going to go somewhere else. Yeah. And if you have good people, you should invest in them.
One of the things too, on that note, is I remember this, Doug, at the retreat when we got done, and they realized you had spent, because it's not cheap, right? Like I'm not cheap. We do some serious killer work, but it's not cheap. And they came to you afterward, and there was at least 3 dudes that had said, I'll freaking follow you anywhere. Yeah. And when you lead that way and you're willing to pour into your team, the loyalty you now have over this team, you still have the same team in place. There's only one person that's not here this year that just chose to do a different job, right? There's only one person. So everybody in COVID, when there's turnover and all that kind of crap, right? Your leadership team is locked and loaded and solid, and they will follow you anywhere. Because when you lead as their top leader and say, you are valuable enough to me, I'm willing to put money and invest in you and invest in your character and your personal development. And yes, it has a direct impact on your ROI, but that wasn't your driver. Your driver was, we need good leaders, and these guys had potential. This team is one of the most youngest and talented teams. I'll have to share this story with you because I was talking to somebody the other day and we were talking about the age of this team. And we know, you and I have had some conversation of that's kind of part of some of the issues, right? Yeah. Is lack of maturity and experience and all that kind of stuff. And I was sharing what we were up to and how we were going and where we were headed. He's like, you can't do that with that young of a team. And I was like, watch me. Game on. And here's the deal. I wouldn't say that, and I wouldn't commit to this trajectory with this team if the talent wasn't there. You guys are freaking talented. You guys are young and freaking talented. And I cannot wait to see where this company is a year from now. I mean, every year it gets more exciting.
Yeah. I'm stoked.
Ashlyn, what about you as far as takeaways? Is anything that you would say that was key to your transformation over the last year that somebody could implement right now?
The rewriting the limiting beliefs is probably the biggest thing for me. Having enough self-awareness to know what I was telling myself and what was on repeat, and then being conscious of when we were just talking about this in the book club on Wednesday that we do every week of you're gonna have somewhat of a negative thought, but it's just not letting it continue, right? Because we're reading The Power of the Subconscious Mind.
Oh, you did? Good.
Yeah,
I'm so glad.
Reading that.
That's another great one.
So we're reading Power of the Subconscious Mind. It's on Audible for all of you that want to listen to it. And he talks about you're not gonna just have this hard stop where you never think a negative thought again.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's this knowing when it's happening, stopping it in its place, and then rewording it to make it a non-limiting belief of something that it can give you power and momentum and move into this place of like, now my subconscious is feeding positive thoughts. And so that's the biggest thing for me. And then like, I've been told that my whole life, which was what I was saying at the beginning of the podcast, is a lot of this stuff is basic, but it's putting it into practice and holding yourself accountable that's important.
Well,
go ahead.
Go for it.
I was just gonna say it's really interesting to me because there isn't a hard stop, I don't think, for people to like change the way they think, but I do think there's a continual progression toward less and less negative because like I almost never have negative thoughts about myself, and it's not because I think I'm like so perfect, but I just don't.
What's accepting?
I just don't think those thoughts.
Yeah.
Like I just think about the positive or the best outcome possible as much as possible.
But
that's
you weren't always that way.
No, I wasn't always that way. But I think that the progression of cutting off the negativity in my life, ending the bad relationships, choosing who I spend my time with, starting to practice some meditation. I'm not a big meditation person. I think I probably try to get into that more, but I do meditate a little bit every day. It's just a thankfulness meditation in the morning, which I think sets my mindset for the day. And I think it's a progression of all these steps that has led me to a place where I don't think negative thoughts anymore. I don't like give myself a lot of negative feedback. And if I do, they're brief and they're gone.
It's a really good point on repetition. Like this is like working out. This is working, going to the gym for your brain. You have to continually, daily, like you said, it's like, it's not like they go away. You daily have to keep a pulse on it. You daily have to be training your brain. And that's the beauty of meditation, is that's like the workout regimen for your brain, where you get into that state and you can reprogram it. That's the most receptive state you can be in for reprogramming.
Yeah.
But you can't not work out for 6 months and go ride a marathon. It's the same thing with this brain work, right? And the emotional work.
You like lose momentum too, which is like, and it's so hard to get back on the horse, right?
That's so true.
So like, don't stop. I was actually telling Easton, my 6-year-old, this the other day. He's like, I'm terrible about a video game. And I'm like, you're only failing because you're stopping. Like you keep trying, you're going to get better, right? Like this is stupid, but he couldn't pass a level on a video game. And he's like, I can't do it. I'm like, okay, but I wasn't good at video games when I was a kid either. Yeah. And I can, you know what I mean? Like it's that basic concept.
Well, it's a basic concept, and it's his choice of words, right? Yeah. Where he says, I can't do that. I lose my shit over my kids when they say that. And I'm like, you figure out a way to do it. Because then when we say, back to the words in the brain, our brain being a goal achieving machine, when we say I can't, you've now shut off any potential to tap into creativity and problem solving. So that's why with the teams that we work with, where we address this with you guys, where don't bring me a problem, bring me a challenge, but have a solution first. Yeah. Right? You come to my office with a solution. It might not be the right one, like you said. I still run the ship, and I'm still at the helm, so I'll make the final decision. But when we do that, and we're like, there is a way to get through this, because that's the other thing, just the belief in realizing, like, every failure you've gone through, every issue everybody's had, you've made it. You've gotten through it, so you can get through it.
I think it was Tom Hanks' video. He said, one thing I wish I'd learned sooner in life is this too shall pass.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really key to like just letting go of that past and saying this part is past, and now I'm looking at where I'm at right now and what am I going to do right now. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this by just saying there's some takeaways here, and meditation I think is great. Yeah. Reinforcing how you're thinking about like what is your self-talk. Cut off the negativity out of your life, guys.
Oh my gosh.
If you're out there feeding yourself with negative, by watching the news every night, listening to talk radio all day long, stuffing your brain with COVID and politics and war and murder and abductions, and that's all shit that's going to drag you down. Get rid of that stuff. Surround yourself with some great people. Practice some meditation, and grab a book and read a book just one a month. It's not a huge ask, but make the time to do that and do some personal work to change your life, and the results a year from now will be transformative.
Nothing will change unless you start putting in that
work.
work.
There's one guarantee. Yeah. You will stay the same if you don't do anything.
Exactly.
Right. Guaranteed.
Yeah. Yep. So, thank you for joining us. Smash that like and subscribe, and please share us with your friends. And hopefully we're providing something that's really great to change your life. If you have a mind for business or you want to grow, we are the podcast for you.